Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our event, Volunteerism, A Bold Conversation. My name is Tracy Nielsen, and I serve as the Executive Director of HandsOn Twin Cities. For those of you who aren't familiar, HandsOn Twin Cities is a 102-year-old volunteer center that works to equip, inspire, and mobilize people to provide hands-on impact to solve the most pressing challenges in our communities. We work with approximately 600 nonprofit organizations, assisting them with their volunteer management and recruitment needs. We collaborate with approximately 600 nonprofit or large companies and small companies to empower their employees to serve the community in a way that builds upon their corporate social responsibility goals. And we directly advocate about 220,000 volunteers annually through our corporate partnerships. As for individuals, we are the easiest way to make a difference by connecting you to volunteer experiences with local organizations that align with your time and talent and expertise. We're thrilled today to be partnering with all of our different folks to provide this event. For those of you who have attended the breakfast this morning, you know that it's a very, very powerful and inspiring opportunity. Last year, we were able to convene more than 800 people at US Bank Stadium in person. But given the pandemic, we did not have that opportunity to do that this year. So we're thrilled to be hosting this panel event instead and providing an entire website of opportunities for you to take advantage of. We are hosting this event today in partnership with the Woke Coach and Seena Hodges. And our panelists are here because we believe that volunteering should be the start of a journey towards equity in the Twin Cities. For community members who care, building connections with neighbors, deepening our understanding of local goals and challenges, and following community leadership are the first steps in deeper involvement. Over time, volunteers can become active participants in the Twin Cities civic fabric, advocating for a more vibrant and equitable city for all. And we believe that it starts with important conversations like the one that we are having today. We especially want to thank our sponsors, General Mills and Target, for making today's event possible. So with that, it's my great pleasure to briefly introduce today's moderator, Seena Hodges. She is a connector who loves people and is passionate about equity, intersectional feminism, and access to brave spaces for all. Seena founded the Woke Coach as she witnessed the nation's awakening of racial injustices. She saw an opportunity to help shepherd people through their transformational journeys. She's dedicated herself to helping clients move from ally to accomplice. The staff at HandsOn Twin Cities has been working with Seena for the past year and a half, going through the From Ally to Accomplice program. It's been a transformative experience for our team, deepening our analysis and developing an understanding around the issues of racism, bias, allyship, and injustice. Seena also brings her own experience as a volunteer as she serves on the Board of Trustees of the Walker Arts Center. She's currently serving in the roles of Vice President of the Board and the Chairperson of the Governance and Nominating Committee, and is also the recent co-chair of the Avant Garden, the organization's annual $1 million fundraiser. So with that, I will turn it over to Seena and our panelists, and we hope that you enjoy the conversation.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for that introduction. Thank you, thank you. And thank you all for joining us today. Before we officially begin our time together, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that I am currently on the traditional homeland of the Wapikuti and Anishinaabe people past and present. I acknowledge the forcible removal of those humans from their land and know that I sit here today because of it. I'd like to ask you to take a moment to find out whose land you live, work, and otherwise engage on, gain a better understanding of their issues, and commit to being a better steward of the land that you inhabit, wherever that land might be. Thank you. Volunteerism, a bold conversation. So we included the word bold in the title for the event. And bold means showing an ability to take risks, be confident, and be courageous. That means that this conversation will be rooted in the truth of our current circumstance and the history that informs it. We also hope that this conversation helps you have a better understanding of how volunteerism can be an effective tool for creating a more equitable community, and that you're encouraged to be bold in your volunteerism after you leave this space. So with that, I just want to take a moment to quickly introduce you to our fabulous panel for today's conversation. First, we have Johnathan Palmer. Johnathan is the Executive Director of the Hallie Q. Brown Community Center. Hi, Johnathan.
Hello.
We also have Laverne Knighton. She's the Area Development Director for the United Negro College Fund, or more affectionately known as UNCF. And we also have with us Nadege Souvenir. Nadege is the Senior Vice President of Operations and Learning for the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation. Welcome, friends. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
All right. So before we hop in, I just want to do a quick bit of level setting. We have 1 hour together today, and an hour is a lot of time, but it's also not a lot of time. And so as you can imagine, I have a slew of questions for my friends on the panel. If you have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function. We will get to as many of those questions as we can, if we can. Right? After today's event, we'll also commit to updating the HandsOn Twin Cities website with the most commonly asked questions. You can also find our panelists' complete bios there as well. So just knowing that we have a short amount of time together, I'd really just like to jump right into the conversation. And for each of the panelists, I'd just like to ask you in a minute or less, just tell us who you are and what you'd like for this audience to know about you.
Who's gonna go first? Oh, I'll go first. Hi, everyone. I am Laverne Knighton. I am currently the area director for UNCF, as Cena mentioned. And what I'd like to today's audience to know about me is that I am very passionate about community and about my community in particular. And being asked to serve on this panel today was a great honor because my life has been rooted in community and serving in ways that speak to what my life has reflected. So just a great honor to have the passion and be able to talk about it with this group of friends and panelists today. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Laverne.
All right, I guess I'll jump in. Hi, everyone, Nadege Souvenir. I am a former attorney who now works in philanthropy. And when I'm not sort of at my day job at the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation, you will often find me in art spaces, at the theater, at the opera, where I happen to be the board chair, at the Walker, sometimes hanging out with Cena out there. And for me, I think what I'd love you all to know is the work that we're talking about, the conversation we're going to have today, this bold conversation focused on volunteerism, the reality is what you learn today can be applied in your work, in your life, and not just in that volunteer space. And regardless of who you are, there are ways for you to be bold every day.
Thank you.
And I'm Johnathan Palmer. I'm the executive director of Hallie Brown Community Center. We're a 91-year-old African-American social service agency open to everyone. But volunteerism is something that I'm involved in many regards. I sit on a few boards, MDI, the Convergence, and I've been involved with a lot of nonprofit efforts over the years. And one of the best things about volunteering is that it gives you a chance to get engaged with your passion and to help out in ways that help organizations continue to thrive. So I'm excited for a bold conversation about what's good, how to do this, and what are some of the best practices that we have.
Yeah, thank you, folks. Thank you so much. So Nadege, you talked a little bit about being the board chair at the Minnesota Opera, but as you all think about, in addition to the roles that you hold in your everyday professional lives, you alluded to the fact that you all each are volunteers. So when you think about volunteering, how do you determine how you spend your volunteer capital, so to speak?
Yeah, when I think about volunteering, I really focus on what drives me, what am I interested in? What am I passionate in? Because the reality is volunteering is on top of what you're doing on your day-to-day, no matter what your day-to-day looks like. And so you can't bring your heaviness to a volunteer space. So that's why I tend to find myself in the arts because, I am passionate about the performing arts and that's where I volunteer a lot. And also, when I think about how I want to volunteer, I think about what is the opportunity and what do I have real capacity for? Because what I don't want to do is commit to doing something and then I'm not able to show up in that way because frankly, that's worse than having said no in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Right about that. Laverne or Johnathan, how do you determine how you spend your volunteer capital, so to speak?
Well, for me, it is, as I said in my opening, it's about community. And for me, when I make that determination of where I want to invest my time, it usually centers around the greater good that brings out, elements of education. I started early in my life in Houston, Texas, tutoring and mentoring young people. So I've come to know that over the years, my energy and passion really serves me well when what I do is to better the lives of young people. So it just happened, I think, by osmosis. I didn't set out with one set of principles to guide me, but what I've looked at over the years in my life is that everything, the through line in that is that I'm always serving young people, always trying to make sure that what their needs are being met, and whatever role I can play in investing in them drives me to continue to make that change.
Thank you, Laverne.
For me, it is, what am I passionate about? Getting involved in something where I'm going to spend the scant amount of free time that is available. I want it to be something that one, fills my soul, makes me feel engaged, but also where I can make a difference. It is something that I'm adding value. For me, it doesn't work to just show up and stand around and be another body in the room. I want to be engaged, want to roll up my sleeves and get involved in that. And, at Hallie, we have a lot of volunteers, and they help us do the work that we do. We couldn't do it without them. So volunteers are really an essential part of a lot of the organizations in the Twin Cities that do really great work. And so finding the one that fits with me, that has issues that I'm passionate about, is where I prioritize.
Yeah, thank you, Johnathan. It's really interesting to talk about, passion and what are we passionate about. And so when we think about passion and we're thinking about volunteerism, when individuals are really thinking about, okay, I'm going to volunteer, I'm going to make a difference, what are some basic things that they should consider? You talked about passion, Johnathan, but what are some other basic things that folks should really think about when they say, I want to be a volunteer?
I think that some of the basic things is, what are your priorities? What's important to you? What will it make a difference? I mean, getting involved in something, if you're going to put your time and effort into things, you want it to be something that helps forward an agenda. For me, it's, looking at issues of race and racial reconciliation and healing, and justice. And so looking towards that lens, finding the things that are actually going to help people move ahead, help our city, our country be better. Those are the kinds of things I think you want to look towards as a priority.
Yeah, thank you, Johnathan. Nadege or Laverne, you want to weigh in on that? And just what are some basic things that folks should consider when they want to volunteer?
Yeah, I think, the super basic thing you got to consider is, why do you want to volunteer? And that seems like it's obvious, right? We all want to volunteer to do good, but the reality is a lot of people want to volunteer to center themselves. They want to volunteer so they can add a list of, credentials to their background and to their work or whatever it is, or show up in the same place as so-and-so so they can establish that networking relationship. So, in addition to everything that, Johnathan said, I think you really got to ask yourself that first question. Why am I out here? Why is it that I want to do this?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I will add to that, it's really considering who you're serving. And again, as both have said, the why, knowing your why, but also knowing the why of what the needs are, and actually finding those needs and addressing them, but addressing them through the lens of the people that you are choosing to serve, and being respectful and understanding that you may not know what's best for them, but you should certainly engage in understanding what is best, and asking those questions to the people that are going to benefit from what you're trying to offer, because sometimes we can go in and do more harm than good.
You know, so to that point, a lot of things just came up. We talked about centering yourself. We talked about, believing that we know better than other people do. So what are some, in your own practice and in your own experience, what are some common mistakes that you've seen volunteers make when trying to show up in communities? And we just named a couple of them. Nadege, you talked about centering yourself. Laverne, you talked about folks not being familiar with what the needs are of the community. But what are some ways that folks, and you talked about that causing harm, right? And so what are some of the ways that we can make mistakes in our volunteerism?
One, I think, is coming in and deciding what's best for a community or an organization or a group. If you're going to get involved and volunteer with an effort that's already established, you want to find out what they need versus what you've decided they need. And the idea of sending yourself, if you're there for the photo op, if you're there to go ahead and do the network, then you're not really there to volunteer to help people. You're there to volunteer because it's a resume builder or because it's something that puts a feather in your cap. So it's not the right priority. You can look at all of those the priorities around why you'd want to be involved, and if it's not centered on the organization or the group that you're helping, then you're not adding value at that point.
And I would add that we must do the work. Do the research, understand the organization, understand their mission and their vision and their values, and then you'll know more about how to best find those mutualities and the benefit that will serve their clients, serve the people who are most in need. And when you're doing work in the community directly, really be careful about how you set yourself up to quote, be of service and to do good. I mean, this summer we all jumped in after the George Floyd murder to find ways to just do. We just wanted to do something. We wanted to be about visibility in the community and helping. But a lot of those good efforts did some harm, I think, in some ways, because the capacity wasn't there to do the work and do the work in a more respectful way. I was a part of some of those community efforts and realized that, when you don't have the infrastructure to do the work right, you can really hurt your cause and hurt the people who are showing up in numbers to be served, and you can't effectively do what's needed. But, take the time, do the work, and really, build on the platforms that need to be built on so that people can be served with dignity, be served with respect, and with regard to what their real needs are.
Yeah. Laverne, you said two interesting things just now, dignity and respect. Through my work with HandsOn Twin Cities, I've become familiar with the term volunteerism, and when we talk about volunteerism, what is that? Where folks want to go and they want to go take a photo with the unsheltered folks, but they may want to, have the photo taken serving, meals, but won't sit down and have a meal with those same folks, right? So we go into community, we cause harm, but we do that by, Nadege talked earlier, where we're centering ourselves, we're making mistakes, we're causing a lot of harm. And I guess the one thing we want to just say to folks straight out is like, no volunteerism. Like volunteerism is just not okay, right?
Like that.
Yeah. No volunteerism. It's not okay. So if that is the case and volunteerism does not work, which we know it doesn't, how do you really engage and build trust with communities?
I think,
go
please
ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead, Nadege.
Okay. This question has so many layers, and I know you're asking it because it comes up, but I always want to say to somebody when they ask this question, how do you build trust with anybody? Why are you othering the community such that it requires a different and special process? I mean, when you are, initiating a new relationship, you get to know people, you figure out things that you can find out about them before you meet them. You use the Google, right? Like you do all the basic stuff. But I want to point out that question always troubles me just a little bit. And I know that there are like deep and other things to talk about, because there is a sense of othering that lives behind that question. How do you build trust with community? Because they're not me, they're that over there.
And that goes to a very simple point, is that people often think about the cause that they're helping, or the people that they're working with to help, as those people over there. As that, just as Nadege is saying, the othering. It's you're going in because you want to help the underprivileged, you want to help those poor people that need the help. Well, they're people. And the thing that you have to remember is that they have the same needs as anybody else. They need a safe place to live, they need food, they need shelter, they need clothes, all the same things that you would want. And so when you're going to get engaged, look at them as people, look at them as engaged, sit down and have that meal with them. Ask them about their family, ask them about their lives. There is such a prejudice that goes into getting involved, and the idea of I'm a better person because I'm helping these underprivileged people get a hand up. You would be surprised how many people end up at food shelves and at shelters who were rich, who were really well off and got laid off. This last year, especially, we've seen a rocket high number of people who were doing well, and then suddenly their job furloughed because of the pandemic. And now they show up at a food shop and they don't know what to do. And so one of the things we do at Hallie, and many of our partners do, is treat people with respect. And we make sure that they know there's no stigma in showing up, that this is a place that everybody needs help at some point in their lives. And that's how we want to treat you.
Yeah.
And that speaks boldly to, really not making assumptions. Just don't make assumptions about anyone or anything that, has to do with helping, because it, as we all say there, but for the grace of God, go I. It could be any of us on any given day at any given time. So just be mindful of that and not make assumptions that what you're doing is so glorified and so wonderful, because those people really need it. And then that assumption that they should be grateful to get anything. So I feel like that's a mistake we all make sometimes, that what we give or what we're trying to do should be fully appreciated regardless of the circumstances. So that's another, myth that we just need to walk away from, and just go in with the idea that it could be me. It could be me any day.
Yeah, that the points you all are making about bias and putting our own bias aside and really recognizing that we all have bias is a really important piece of it. Also recognizing that we have to listen to the community. When I'm talking to clients, sometimes I talk about the thing that, we do, it's inherent that folks like to center themselves, because you feel like, well, what would I need if I were in that scenario, right? So you could be, driving past a group of kids, and a group of kids can be playing soccer with no shoes on, right? And then you say to yourself, oh my goodness, I got to get those kids some shoes. And so you go out and you partner with your friends, you might get some sponsorships, you do the GoFundMe, you get all the money, right? And then you go to the kids and you say, here you go, here's some shoes so you can play soccer. And the kids look at the shoes and they say, thank you, because they're polite, but they say, but if you had really asked us, we would have told you we needed clean water, right? And so also the other part of it is that sometimes as volunteers, we center ourselves, even not only in our being present in that place, but we center ourselves with what we believe we need and what we would need in someone else's circumstances. Can you talk a little bit about how that can be really harmful in volunteer efforts?
Certainly, you get into, if you're not able to get into the frame of reference and understand exactly what somebody's life is like, then you start going ahead and centering your efforts around what it is that you think they need or what you think would be appropriate. But if you're dealing, especially when you're dealing with somebody from a different culture or the BIPOC communities, you may not know what the priorities are. When you're working with organizations that are in community, a lot of times they have that information. So Laverne touched on this a little bit before. There were a lot of efforts that came up in after the murder of George Floyd, and people were doing food drives and food kitchens and things like that. And they didn't check in to see what other organizations were already doing that kind of work that they could have partnered with. And I don't want to say anything negative about the efforts. It was good that people were getting involved and engaged, but we saw time after time people would start these things and then they would get through the weekend and realize they didn't have refrigeration or they didn't have storage. And then they'd contact us or contact one of our partners to say, let's work together. And efforts can be maximized at the beginning if you do things like that. If you talk with people who have been in the communities, talk with organizations that are there, talk with the elders, find out what the needs are instead of just walking in the door and deciding what has to happen, because somebody else then ends up cleaning up after that.
And I would even say that that goes to a more granular level. If you are volunteering in person and you show up at a place and you start touching stuff and moving things, like when folks tell you what, when you show up as a volunteer, they'll tell you what they need you to do. And that's the way that we should engage. We should always engage with a way that puts community first and honors the organization that is having us as a guest. Essentially, we're guests in those spaces. And so it really means that we have to show up as guests. We have to take orders and we have to really show up in a way that has an extreme level of humility and understanding. And I think what's hard sometimes is that no one likes to be in a scenario where they don't know everything. But when you're a volunteer, you don't know everything. There's no way that you possibly could. And so it is really important that when we're showing up in these spaces that we are listening, we're learning, and then we're engaging. And that's the thing that I think is really key and critical to our volunteer efforts. So I want to talk about, why it's important to apply an anti-racist lens to your volunteer efforts, right? So I want to name a few very key things, right? In Minnesota, we have socially responsible Fortune 500 companies. We have some of the best hospitals in the country. We have, like Nadege alluded to earlier, a very thriving arts culture, a culture of generous philanthropy. And the Twin Cities are really often touted as one of the best places to live in the United States. But, once you start to look at that data, it tells a different story. African Americans are worse off in Minnesota than in almost every other state in the nation. So there's racial disparities here that are just among the worst in a lot of key indicators of quality of life, from employment to education, criminal justice, juvenile justice, income, poverty, home ownership, and health. And so we talked a lot about, not centering yourself. We talked a lot about finding out what the need is in the community. But once we look at the need, and we look at that along racial lines, what advice do we have for volunteers that are really seeking to apply that anti-racist lens to their volunteer efforts? We saw a lot of people when George Floyd was murdered looking for ways to get in. And so what advice do we have for people who are really trying to center their volunteer efforts around being anti-racist?
I would say that it goes into the piece that we're talking about in terms of engaging and understanding the community. And the idea, again, goes back to understanding what it is you're getting involved in and doing the investigation and the research. Just because somebody is Black does not mean that their effort is being anti-racist. There's a specific criteria that you go around and you need to look at towards anti-racism and what you're doing to deconstruct the systems that have been in place that have been maintaining the status quo. I mean, we still refer to people as minorities, and that right there is a harmful thing, when it should be people of color, it should be BIPOC, it should be the specific race or group that they're a part of. We still look at this through this lens that Nadege brought up of the othering, of saying that those people over there. And so if you're still trying to go ahead and not engage and understand what the issue actually is, you're going to go ahead and perpetuate the same problems, the same systems that are in place, and it's going to make it harder for people to actually get out from under the boot that is over them.
Yeah.
And to add on to that, I think it's really understanding that racism is not a Confederate flag at our nation's capital. it is like the systematic layering of, laws, rules, regulation, decisions. I mean, you can just pile them on. And so the reality is, when you go into a space, if you truly have an anti-racist lens, you're not just waiting for the opportunity to correct somebody if they use, inappropriate sort of words or whatever. You should be looking for, hey, there's a disproportionate result every time we do this program, and we only seem to be benefiting these types of people, or whatever it is. And so I think that the reality is, you have to understand all of that is packed in there, and that frankly, BIPOC folks, like, we're carrying all of that every day. I might not be talking about somebody came and ran past me with a Confederate flag, but I may be having a day where, I was shushed for the umpteenth time by somebody who didn't want to acknowledge my voice as a Black woman in a meeting. And so I think if you don't acknowledge that that reality sits with the folks that you are, volunteering with all day long, then you might as well just be perpetuating those very same racist structures.
And I think that also brings in what we spoke about earlier, the volunteerism, not tapping into that as your rationale for being there, and feeling like you should get your moment with a photo op with wanting to see the families that you're serving, and or can we have a tour to see where they live, or where they reside, or where the children are, and taking advantage of that, because that reeks of, that insensitivity to the, privacy and the dignity of those families, and they're not there to be showcased. So being careful of that, especially if you're, a white person who, is really there for the greater good, but that moment where you want to really get in there and have a hands-on moment with those families that we're serving, that volunteerism piece does not sit well in that case. And I would also add that we as people of color need to continue to do better at being volunteers. Our volunteerism looks different in our community sometimes, because we're, most of us are connected to our churches, so the work we do can sometimes be done through our churches, so we're serving people that look just like us. But we as a whole also need to be mindful of ramping up our own volunteer efforts, so that we can be representative of some of the people that we're serving, or that are being served, so that they can see people that look like them, and those efforts will not be unchallenged with some of the needs that are out there.
Yeah. Thank you all. Yeah, this is a really good, all the points that you're making are really good points. I want to take us back to, the reason why we're even here today, right? So today we're here, talking about volunteerism, talking about service, and honoring the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. On this day every year, I know you've all seen it, a lot of individuals, a lot of organizations, where you can find Dr. King quotes everywhere. They're all over the web today, right? And sometimes I think that we may fail to make the connection that he really was assassinated in his pursuit of achieving the dream of racial equity, right? And sometimes it can seem like, words are what's going to fix our circumstances, but what really is going to fix our circumstances, I believe, are our actions, and how we actually show up, and how we engage, and we understand the needs of the community. We don't participate in things like volunteerism. When you read a lot of Dr. King's materials, one of the biggest disappointments that he had, outside of the existing inequity, was with members of the white moderate, whom he called, and I'm quoting here, the Negro's greatest stumbling block in our stride toward freedom. He wrote about that in great lengths in his letter from Birmingham City Jail. And if folks in the audience haven't read that, I'd really encourage them to read that piece. But when he talked about the white moderate, it was speaking about, white folks who were more devoted to order than to justice, and folks that preferred a negative peace, and don't really want any tension when we are trying to achieve justice. And so, one of the things that's really important is that if we are all going to change the circumstance, we talked about the data, we talked about why the need is so great. And if we're going to change our circumstances, people are really going to have to opt into this work of volunteering, right? And so how can people commit to using their powers and their privilege for the benefit of others through volunteerism?
I'm trying not to be the first person every time. I don't want to dominate, but here, no, I mean, this is actually a really great point, and a really great thing, because, first and foremost, it's speak up, and it's recognize what the things are and speak out of it. When you look at what is happening, I'm going to just jump right here as we're in a bold conversation to the national stage and what has happened. When you look at it, doesn't matter what political party you're affiliated with or who you support. I'm talking about just looking at the actions and looking at the treatment. The treatment that was done to those people who tried to do an insurrection of the United States of America compared to the treatment of people at a Black Lives Matter protest, and the distinction. Looking at that and recognizing that there is a difference and calling that out, that is volunteering through an anti-racist lens. That is going ahead and seeing the disparity that exists and naming it and going ahead and calling for that. Anybody who is calling for unity right now before justice, that is that white moderate that Dr. King was talking about. Mm-hmm. We have an issue in this country of race and racism that is a gaping wound that constantly gets covered over and never addressed and never dealt with. And we pass it along and we go ahead and say, let's all just get along. We don't want to upset the apple cart while we're going ahead and doing this. That's why we continue to have these problems. So when you're talking about looking at things through an anti-racist lens, you got to look at the root causes of why these issues. Why is there poverty in the communities? Why do people exist in different sections where there is a lack of resources, a lack of means, and all of that you can tie back to slavery. You can tie back to what we've done to Native cultures here in this country. You can tie back to what has been done to BIPOC communities and the tier that is set up around maintaining white privilege and white supremacy. And you don't have to be a racist person who carries the Confederate flag and wears a sheath to be engaged in a racist system and to be a part of that and unknowingly perpetuating that. Yeah. So when you're looking at that lens, take a look at the root causes, take a look at how we got here and what you can do to help stop that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I would add to that, that the hope in all that Johnathan just said lies in how we got to where we are even today, after, again, George Floyd's murder, and the pandemic that we were already in. We all were able to be still and to see what was going on and to see that this really is a problem. Our systemic racism, just the layers were just peeled back from all of that, and the nation, people rose up, white, black, red, yellow, all of us, came together for the first time in a long time to actually honestly see and speak up and speak out and really, really address the issues. And companies and corporations like Target, like 3M, and General Mills have all stepped up and really addressed their, equity and inclusion initiatives and their racial reckoning platform. So these are the things that we are going to continue to need to happen in order to really, really address that power and privilege that has held so many down for so long, and that we've not really taken the time to see and to look at from a direct lens. And I think, the nation has had an opportunity to really address a lot of these concerns and now talk about it openly and actually be in a place where, you're being asked to do your own work. We as Black people are always asked to, how can I do this? How can I do that? Well, you have to go into your own space and do your own work and realize that, you know, your privilege has gone unchecked for so long, and that we as a people need allies, we need everybody to get on board to really speak up and make the changes that are needed in our society as we move into those spaces of volunteering and in those spaces of, you know, doing what's right and making a change.
Yeah. Thank you, Laverne. Thank you. Yeah. So as we have this conversation about being an anti-racist volunteer and really understanding what the challenges are, really understanding how to engage with communities in ways that are not harmful, right? So the question then inherently becomes, if folks are really engaged in this and they want to do it, how do they start? What is step one for someone who is in this conversation today and says, you know what, I want to be bolder in my volunteer efforts when I leave this space, what do I do?
Check out HandsOn Twin Cities website. That's one way to start. You can see some of the great volunteer opportunities they have. And then, you know, take a look at what you're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And find the organizations that are doing that. Find the groups that are engaged around that. Grassroots efforts are great too. It doesn't have to be an organization. There's a lot of great grassroots efforts that are going on. Get involved and get engaged, but talk to the organizers, talk to whoever's in charge. Find out a way that you can get involved and what they need, and see if it matches up with you. If it matches up with you and what you're passionate about, get in there and do that.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of the historical context that we've been referring to specifically or alluding to, that information is available. Do not walk into a volunteer situation and ask somebody to take their time to educate you for free on things that you could find, you know, for yourself, because the reality is they're deep in trying to do the work. They want you to come as a volunteer to help do the work, not for them to pause, educate you, hope that you stay beyond the education, and then actually, you know, find yourself to be a fruitful volunteer. And so, you know, take advantage of the resources that exist, that have been created. I mean, everybody's talking about this now. So if you know, say to yourself, well, I've never heard about, just the other day, somebody said to me, I'd never heard about redlining. And for me, I'm like, how is that still possible? But it is still possible. But the reality is, Google it and you will find the books and the resources and the articles, and you can get yourself caught up before you come and talk to somebody and say, hey, can you tell me what redlining is? Because I can tell you that will crush somebody's soul just a little bit if that is the entry to a conversation with you and, you know, you're volunteering with them.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things I tell folks all the time is it's important to choose your lane. So to Johnathan's point about like choosing the thing that you're most passionate about, that's the thing that's really important. But the other thing is, you know, I tell people to look at some of these situations just like, you know, if you were trying to get a job and you applied for a position and they called you up and they said to you, hey, we're gonna interview you for this position. What's the first thing you do? You go to that website, you know, backwards and forwards. If it's a nonprofit and you're super savvy, you've looked at the 990 to see how much money people make, to know how much money you can ask for if you're offered the position, right? And so when things really benefit us and we can see those things right in front of our faces, we do so many things to engage. And so what I'm saying is that when you are presented with opportunities to engage, you have to use that same level of fervor in order to engage. And it doesn't take a lot of time, but it does mean that we all have to have the presence of mind that it's really important to do that work and to do that research and educate ourselves. The other thing I just wanted to add to this conversation is that sometimes for whatever reason, you know, Nadege, very early on in the conversation, you talked about the fact that volunteerism for you choose things that because you know that you're going to have to do those things on top of what you're already doing. And so I just want to state it very plainly that if your volunteer efforts include writing checks and that's like what you can do, please continue to write checks. Please don't be dissuaded. If that is your lane and that is where you can be in and make a significant contribution, please, by all means, make that a part of your volunteerism. Yeah.
Coming from a nonprofit perspective, I totally agree with that. So for sure, if you can write that check, we welcome it. And I've been on the corporate side. I've spent, you know, bulk of my career with Target. So I know from the philanthropy side what writing that check really means and how important it is for the nonprofit community to be able to survive and thrive operationally. So the money matters, but your time and talent also matters even greater.
Yeah. So as we start to wind up here, there's a question here that I'm going to put out for the panel. And the person says, thank you so much for this essential conversation. As a mother of 2 small children, how would the panel address both bringing your children into volunteerism, but having the critical conversations to drive an equitable future?
Good question.
Mm-hmm.
I think that with small children, your best effort is going to be community-led efforts, getting involved with your neighborhood organization or with organizations that have a child focus, because oftentimes there is an opportunity for young people. It's often hard to take, for example, I'll say it's often hard to take young people out to a food shelf and have them be able to get meaningfully engaged, because there's a lot of care that needs to go in showing them. But when you're doing something like a coat drive or a food drive, there's ways for young people to get engaged because it's at a level that they can understand what you're doing. We use, for example, we have AARP volunteers who come in and work with our early learning center kids and our teaching gardens and teach the kids how to garden, and the food and the stuff that they grow in the teaching gardens is then brought into the food shelf as vegetables. So they're learning about that. They connect it in. They call the food shelf the store, which helps to erase some of the stigma. But that's a way in which we're helping young people to understand about giving back, helping them understand about getting engaged at a level that fits their needs, and that they can also see what it's doing.
I don't know that I can add to that. I think when you have little ones that you're trying to engage and I think that education about what you're embarking on begins at home with them, giving them some insight as to, why we're going to go and participate in this particular event or with this particular organization, but giving them that grass level introduction to what volunteerism is or what helping others is, because I know in some cases they probably have done some of the small things in their own communities, but to Johnathan's point, with events such as coat drives and being able to collect coats from neighbors and helping them understand that we're going to now give these to people in need, and they may be people that look like you, there may be people that look like others, but helping them to understand what that greater need is and why they are doing what they're doing. And if you can do that, and educating them at home first and bringing them into that environment, I think you'll be successful.
Yeah.
Right. And I think with, I don't have much more to add on the volunteering piece, but the critical conversations piece, I think that, one, you got to speak to young folks where they are, right? Like, you're not going to open a conversation with a 4-year-old about white privilege and, the historical, dismantling of racism and all of that. But also don't shame a kid for asking a question, right? Like 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds point at stuff all the time and ask questions. And yet when they point at a thing that triggers your concern that, oh, will somebody see that I'm racist? No, that 4-year-old is not racist. They don't know that yet unless you have taught them.
Speaking truth, right.
Right. They're just, they're seeking information. And if you provide the information with that cloak of it's bad and wrong and different, that's how you are failing the critical conversations. You have these moments all the time, but it's hard to remember that sometimes you just got to take a kid's question at face value. And I'm talking too much, but I'm gonna give you a little example because it's one of my favorite examples in my life. Back in the day, I used to teach dance lessons to little girls, in the 3 and 4-year-old range. And one day, a little white girl looked at me and she touched my skin and she said, "Why are you that color?" Now, my co-teacher, a white teacher, I could immediately see she was like, "Oh my God, you can't ask questions like that." So I looked at the little girl and I said, "Why are you that color?" She goes, "Well, my mommy made me this way." There you go. I had my answer. And I said to her, "My mommy made me this way too." And she looked at me and she said, "Okay." And then she went back to doing her plie, which is what she was supposed to be doing. But the reality is that example is so silly, But it's so real, because had
Yeah.
I, raised my cackles at her question, or perhaps had she asked it to my co-teacher, she would have understood in that moment, there's something wrong here, and
Right.
carried that into her future thinking.
Yeah, in some scenarios, somebody be like, "Who raised you?" And then you scarred a child for life, for being curious, and we kind of shut that down. But I think curiosity is inherently the seed of our learning. The things that we are the most curious about are the things that we engage with and we learn the most about, right? So curiosity and passion. And so we talked about a lot of things. And one of the things that I want to do, folks, before we depart from each other today, but I want to share just a couple of key takeaways that we have for the audience, just based on this conversation. And we had this we talked about these things before we got started, but we wanted to make sure that we put these things into the space. So I'm gonna share my screen just to share a couple of what we like to call steps toward meaningful engagement, right? And so what we talk about is defining your purpose. Why is volunteering meaningful to me? And in this moment, I'll tell you, don't feel like you have to take feverish notes right now. We're going to put this on the website. So don't feel like you have to take long notes right now. We'll put this on the website. What are my motivations to volunteer? Which pathway of public service is best for me? We also talked about educating yourself. Do I understand the complexity of the history, the harm done, and the level of resilience that is shown by the people that I seek to serve? Also, this really important point about what institutions currently exist in the community that are tackling these issues that you care the most about, right? We also talked about not exploiting communities. Are you going into that community with a savior mindset? Are you working with the community in collaborative and equitable ways? Do you understand what their needs are and their issues are as they see them, right? Also, quite honestly, just don't center yourself. We talked about that as well. And the questions that you have to ask yourself are, why am I engaging in this opportunity? And secondly, who am I centering and serving? And finally, continuing learning and engage deeper. Where do I go from here? It's that point of really consistently opting in, continuing to learning, to continue to do deeper engagement is a really important part of how we show up. The last piece is practicing accountability and consistency. So that means, how am I choosing to show up? Not only just today, right? For the long term, right? We know that these issues that plague us didn't happen overnight. So we're going to have to really dedicate some time and volunteer efforts to kind of getting us out of these situations and circumstances. So where do you go? How do I stay involved when I am no longer part of the service? So maybe you were volunteering for a period of time, but you know that the issue still exists. Does that mean that you start to work with another organization? How do you continue to stay engaged and be accountable, right? So these are just some things that we like for folks to think about as they think about their volunteer efforts. So just wanted to put those in the space. And like I said, those will be available on the website. And before I hand it back to Tracy, just want to ask our volunteers if you have any last 10 seconds worth of anything that you want to, I know that's tight, 10 seconds, that you want to put into the space before we give it back to Tracy.
I would say, go ahead, Laverne.
I would just say thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation. I am so blessed to have been on, the corporate side of volunteerism, as well as now the nonprofit side. And Target has been, an amazing company that, my standard of volunteering has always been generated from what I learned at Target. And I've always said, when I attend any volunteer event, it's what I learned there that kind of sets the pace for me to know when something is being done right. So all of the volunteers from Target Corporation know how to do it, know how to make it move and help and do it with respect and dignity. And that for me has been, my guiding grace.
Thank you, Laverne.
What I would say is that get out there and get involved. We're talking to you today about the ways to do it. These are best practices. So if in any way somebody was discouraged from this, saying, "Oh, I'm not going to do this now because I don't know how to do this," no, there's people who can help you. And the nonprofits and the efforts that are out there, the grassroots efforts, they need you. We need you to be involved. We need you to engage. We need you to show up in the right way, though. And that's why we'll help you with that. That's why we've had this panel discussion today. But get out there and get involved. Find the thing that you're passionate about. Find where you can make a difference and help make the world a better place.
Mhm.
Right. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who took the time to listen to this conversation, because, that's part of it. When there are opportunities for free learning from folks, doing things, and you devote that time, this is part of your volunteer journey. This is part of the process of whatever that next step is. And so I'm thankful that you were willing to listen to all of us gab here, because I was just thankful to be in this space with everybody on this webinar.
All right. Thank you so much, panelists. For the audience, the questions that you have submitted, we will be answering those questions, and those questions and answers will be available on the HandsOn Twin Cities website. We got to as many as we could, so thank you so much, so much. Thank you, panelists. Tracy.
Oh my gosh, well, that was amazing. Thank you so much to Seena and to all of our panelists. And just a reminder that this has been recorded, and if you're anything like me, you will be going back and re-listening to this again. Once again, we want to thank our sponsors, Target and General Mills, for allowing us to have a brave conversation like this. And again, just want to reaffirm that the conversation does not end here. And working with Seena, we were like, this could definitely be a whole series. How do we fit this all into an hour? So keep an eye out for ongoing opportunities for learning and resources. And on the HandsOn Twin Cities website, we have our MLK site. It provides opportunities to volunteer at home, in the community, ideas about how to be an advocate, where to donate, and so on. And we also provided a handout with the slides that Seena had on that site, which is accessible immediately following this. So feel free to go there and check it out. I put a link into the chat for anybody who would like to engage in small group reflective discussions. They will be self-led. So following this event, feel free to take that link, scoot over, and we will put you into small group breakouts to have a follow-up discussion on this panel, because there are so many topics that we can go into from here. We just thank you all so much for your participation. We had about 300 people join us for this conversation. And as Nadege said, thank you for listening and being active participants. We're all learning, we're all growing. We are doing so at HandsOn Twin Cities, and we hope that you'll utilize the resources to continue your learning and growth. And we look forward to learning and growing with you. So once again, thank you, Seena. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, sponsors. And we hope everyone will continue to stay engaged on this special day in celebration of Martin Luther King Jr. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.